Good afternoon. It's Jamie Bograd. I hope all of you are doing well. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are very excited to have our friends from the AAMC to talk today about MCAT research, specifically the MCAT exam that started in 2015 and the research that's being done and planned to be doing in the future. Just a few comments that this meeting is being recorded, so you'll have access to it later. And our friends at MCAT will let us know how they'll answer questions and answers as we move forward. And again, we just want to thank them. We know it's a busy time and we had scheduled this meeting well before COVID-19. So please keep that in mind when we're working through this presentation. Thanks again, and we'll turn it over to you all.
Hello, everyone. This is Kun Yuan from the AAMC. I'm the director of MCAT research. It's really a great pleasure meeting with you all virtually this afternoon. In the next hour or so, my colleague Jesse Highland, who is the manager of MCAT validation research, and I are going to share with you some information about the MCAT exam, specifically resources to support you use MCAT scores in selecting your students. So the agenda, this slide shows the agenda items. I will start by reviewing what the current MCAT exam measures and how it is scored. I will walk you through the score report and explain how you may use different components of the scorecard in selecting your students. And then I will share with you results from surveys of medical admission officers on the importance of different pieces of information in their decision-making, and data from recent admission cycles to see how they've used MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs in a holistic manner. And then after that, Jesse will share with you value of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs in predicting student performance. These results come from the longitudinal study that follows multiple cohorts of students throughout their undergraduate medical education. There we examine how well MCAT predicts student performance in their pre-clerkship and clerkship coursework at different medical schools in the US and Canada, and their unimpeded progression throughout their medical education, as well as their performance on licensure exams, such as step 1, step 2. Towards the end, she will share with you all the updates to the 2020 MCAT testing plan that we made to meet the needs of examinees and medical schools this year. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions. Jesse and I, and also our Director of Outreach and Engagement, Leslie Ward, will take turns to answer your questions when we're not presenting. And towards the end, if we have time left, we can answer more questions. So that's our plan for this presentation. Before I get into details, I want to call your attention to some resources online that you may check out after the webinar and in the future for more resources on using MCAT scores. So there's a website on the AAMC's website. It's called MCAT for Admission Officers. You can find the link on the slides. This is the most comprehensive place for you to learn about the recent resources available about the MCAT exam, the publications, and more specifically about the MCAT validity research. So as you see on the screen, this shows the update to the testing plan. So if you click this button, this shows you the most recent news about changes to testing plan to meet with examinees' needs. And over here, you see 3 areas that you can click into to learn more about resources and data for using MCAT scores in admissions, more details about which schools in the US and Canada are partnering with the AMC on the MCAT evaluation research, and then the recent publications and the presentations about the current MCAT exam. Most of the content you will learn about today comes from this document called Using MCAT Data in Medical Student Selection. This is an annual publication we produce for medical schools to use MCAT scores. It includes information about examinees, how they prepare for the exam, and the most recent evidence about the validity of MCAT scores. And you can go directly to the website that shares the PDF version of this report from the link down here. And also throughout the presentation, you will see a button like this with a specific page number. That's where you can find more detailed results about the topic we present in this document. On the MCAT, on the website about MCAT for admission officers, there's one area for publications and presentation. There you can find the most recent publications related to MCAT and also presentations delivered at conferences like the AMC's annual conference, Learnership Lead, or the annual conferences for groups like the groups on student affairs. And this is a recent, what you see on the screen represents the collection of publication in academic medicine that the MCAT Validity Committee published this year. It includes multiple articles covering topics about the validity of MCAT scores, predicting student performance, about group differences in examinees' preparation and performance on the current MCAT exam, and how to help examinees prepare for the exam, and how to support medical schools considering applicants with scores in a wide range to increase diversity in the healthcare workforce. So we're working on new publications about the MCAT exam. Once they are available, we will post it to the website. And so you can click the link here directly to see these specific publications, and you can also check out the MCAT for admissions officers in the future for new publications. All right, with that, let's get into the first agenda item. What does the current MCAT exam measure, and how is it scored? As many of you might already know, the current MCAT exam was launched in 2015. It measures the foundational concepts and skills students need to be ready for medical school. It is a computer-based exam. All the items are multiple choice items. The exam has 4 sections. What you see, the 4 areas with the name representing those 4 sections. The 2 natural science sections, that means these 2 sections, and the psychological, social, and the biological foundations of behavior. These sections test the foundational concepts and scientific inquiry and reasoning skills that are important to learning in medical school. The critical analysis and reasoning skills ask examinees to analyze, evaluate information in the passages, drawing from humanities and the social sciences to answer the questions. All the information they need to answer those questions are like in the passages or in the questions themselves. And each of the section is scored on a scale that goes from 118 to 132 with a middle point of 125. And the total score is the sum of the 4 section scores. So overall, the total score ranges from 472 to 528 with 500 as the middle point. And this design is specifically designed this way. The total score scale is specifically designed this way to draw attention to applicants with scores around the middle, so that medical schools can consider applicants with a wide range of scores to increase diversity in the healthcare workforce. So that is a brief overview of what the current MCAT exam measures and how it is scored. Next, let's look at the MCAT score report, the different components, and how you may use it in selecting students. So this is how the MCAT score report looks like. It shows the scores, the scale score for each of the 4 sections and the total score. And then this is the confidence band for each section score and the total score, the percentile rank of scores, and finally a score profile that shows you the strength and weakness of an applicant's scores across the 4 sections. I will get to each of these components on the next few slides. So confidence bands. Like any other test, we expect students' competences on those aspects it measures be the only factor that driving students' performance on the exam. But in the reality, there are other factors that affect a student's performance on the exam. For example, test anxiety or fatigue, or their recent exposure to certain topics covered on the test. So their scores on the exam are not perfectly precise. So when reporting scores, a confidence band is also present, just to let you know, their true competency on this aspect may belong to a score range that includes the score they have on the exam, and with certain room around the score, that's where their true competence level may belong to. So for example, for this particular examinee, we see the score on the chemical and the physical foundations of biological systems, the score is 124. And the confidence band goes from 123 to 125. And that means this examinee's true competence level on this section may be 123, 124, 125. And for all the 4 sections, their confidence band will be their score plus or minus 1 score point. That's what you see for all the confidence band over here. And for the total score, the confidence band will go from this total score -2 to this total score +2. That means, although on this particular exam, we see this person scored 501, his or her true total score might go from 499 to 503. And the confidence band for the section score and total score stays the same no matter what the section scores or total scores are, or no matter when the examinee takes the exam. That means the total score always have a confidence band of plus or minus 2 points, regardless of whether this person scored 472 or 520. The section score confidence band always be plus or minus 1 point, no matter when this person takes the exam. So on the next slide, you will see when we consider applicants with similar scores, it's very important to consider their scores and their confidence band and together with other information about applicants to assess their academic readiness. So on these slides, you see 4 pairs of total scores. the first pair have 504 versus 503. And you can see for 504 really is what this diamond shows, with the score over here, and the confidence band goes from 502 to 506. And the one with 503 as the total score, the confidence band goes from 501 to 505. And with these two candidates having a difference of 1 point on the total score, you see it's very likely that their true total score may overlap on these 4 score points, including 502, 503, 504, 505. So that's one example of 2 applicants with just a 1 score difference. It goes from here with this pair, 2 applicants, one with 504, the other with 501, 3 points difference. But then they still have 2 possible values in common in terms of their true total score. So you can see from these examples that when 2 applicants have similar total scores, it's really hard to tell exactly how their true underlying competence level differs. So it's really important to consider their scores, the confidence band, and the other information about these applicants to assess their academic readiness for medical school. The next component on the score report card is the percentile ranks. I know that many medical schools use that to understand how an applicant's scores compare to other test takers' scores. So what these percentages mean is the percent of examinees in the recent years who had the same or similar scores. And we update these percentile ranks every year to capture the performance of recent examinees. So you can see from the screen, this distribution of MCAT total scores and their corresponding percentile rank. This is valid for use from May 1st this year until the end of April next year. We update on May 1st every year, and it has a limit of time to be valid, to be used as a reference for you to understand how this particular applicant compare with other test takers during a period of time. And the last component I mentioned briefly earlier is the score profile. It just provides a visual to let you know the strengths and weakness of an applicant. In one picture, you can see this particular examinee scored higher on these 2 sections and relatively lower on these 2, and the critical analysis reasoning skills is even lower. And this gives you like one view of their strengths and weakness. And then it's still, again, important for you to triangulate these results with other information about this applicant's academic, say, transcript or other information about their learning of subject related to medicine. So one question we got asked many times is how to use scores from applicants who retested. And from the data we see is the majority of examinees take the exam 1 or twice. And the typical gain between their different attempts on the exam is 2 to 3 points. And we did a survey medical schools about their use of scores from those repeaters. It has the following answers represent the common ways to use these scores. Many of them use the most recent scores. The similar percentage use the highest total scores. And then about slightly less than 10% of them used either average total scores across administrations or triangulate with other academic preparation records. And every school has its own practice of assessing the repeaters score. So these are just provided as some reference for you to assess which approach you would like to use. So this is all I will share about the score report that we walked through all the components on the score report and gave some suggestions about how to use them. Next, I'm going to share with you things we learned from medical schools about how they used MCAT scores together with other application data in holistic admissions. So from our review of what MCAT measures and how it is scored, and we understand that MCAT exam measures some, but not all important academic competencies. It's just not realistic to measure all academic competencies important for medical school learning. We have to balance, with other factors like how long or etc. And then we know that MCAT scores are not perfectly precise, just like any other tests. And another thing is MCAT reflects what students can do, but we know there are other things like their motivation, resilience, and their professionalism that are important to how they eventually perform as a doctor. So given all these considerations, it's always important to put MCAT scores in context and use it together with other information about each applicant. So we surveyed medical schools about the importance of different pieces of information available about applicants in their decision making, and this is what we learned from them. What you see on the screen is the categories. This is the category of evidence that they consider as the highest importance. And if you go to page 15 of the guide, you will see more details. The information they considered of the highest importance are their total or the math science related GPAs, MCAT total scores, the trend in their GPA, and their experience in the post-bac program, and if they repeated taking the MCAT exam, their score trend and their completion of pre-medical course requirements. This is the things they consider important in the academic metrics. They also value applicants' experience in the medical clinical environment or just serving as volunteers to the community, their leadership skills. And then in terms of demographics for public schools, they emphasize US citizenship or permanent residency status, their state residency, and also their experience with underserved population or their distance traveled. And certainly they consider interview results as an important piece of information for their decision making. So this is based on what they say that are important for their decision making. Next, let's take a look at what the actual admission decision making data tells us how they use the MCAT scores together with undergraduate GPAs. What you see on the screen is a table that shows for different combinations of undergraduate GPA and MCAT total scores, the likelihood of accepting of being accepted into at least one medical school. This is based on data in the last 3 application cycles. So in these columns, you see different ranges of MCAT total scores going from the lowest to the highest from left to right. And the rows shows the GPA categories as we go from bottom to up, and the GPA goes up. And then in each cell, let's say pick this cell, this percentage shows for applicants with a total score goes from 498 to 501, and a GPA that goes from 3.8 to 4. 30% of the applicants received acceptance from at least one medical school. And how we get this 31%, that is, we have over 3,000 applicants with this combination of MCAT total scores and undergraduate GPA, and this many got at least one acceptance. And you can apply the same rule to understand the results in this table. We use some color coding to show the pattern here. So these green color shows the acceptance rate at 75% and above. And this light green shows the acceptance rate goes from 50% to 74%. And these gray color shows the acceptance rate goes from 25% to 49%. And these marginal columns and rows shows, for example, this column shows the acceptance rate by each being of undergraduate GPA total, regardless of the MCAT total score. And these columns, these rows showed the acceptance rate by MCAT total scores, regardless of the undergraduate GPA. And this cell shows overall across 3 years, 42% of applicants received at least one acceptance. And these are the corresponding numbers of applicants. So as you can see from this table, that admission committees put MCAT scores into context in their decision making. So right, in the right corner of this table, we are seeing that even for the highest, for the combination of highest MCAT total scores and the highest undergraduate GPAs, this group, there are 12% of these applicants who did not receive any acceptance at all. And then for this group that has really mid-range MCAT total and mid-range undergraduate GPA, 40% of them received acceptance from at least one medical school. So these, although, what we can see is only how they used the MCAT total and undergraduate GPA in terms of how they actually made this decision. We don't have the data to understand that process, and all the schools differ. But overall, we can see that schools, they took consideration of all different pieces of their academic readiness into consideration when making such decisions. So with that, I'll end my part of my presentation. Next, I will pass it over to Jessie. I will stop share, and then she will share from her end.
Thank you, Kun. Hi, everyone. I assume you can see my screen. So for the next half of the presentation, I'll be walking you through our findings and some data related to our MCAT validity research. And the focus of this portion of the presentation is really to show you the value of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs and in predicting medical student performance across a range of performance outcomes. So, sorry, give me 1 sec. I'm having trouble advancing my slides. Oh, there we go. So this first slide just gives a handy snapshot of the timeline of our validity research. So as Quinn mentioned that the current version of the MCAT exam was introduced in 2015. So we have been following a few cohorts of medical students since the introduction of the exam. So the 2016 cohort being the first class that was admitted with scores from the current MCAT exam. So as you know, that cohort will be graduating this year. So for the current version of the guide that all this data are in, we have data for the 2016 cohort up to clerkships, and we're currently gathering information on them related to graduation on time and step 2 exams, etc. So those would be coming up in the next iteration of our guide. And then also we have a 2017 cohort that we have data for the first 2 years of their medical school. And this cohort would have just finished clerkships right around now. So we're gathering information on them for their clerkship performance. So as we go through the data for the rest of the presentation, you will see that sometimes some of the analysis is done based on the 2016 cohort, and some of them are done on the 2016 and 2017 cohort combined, and that's mainly a function of the data availability. But across the board, we are seeing very similar results regardless of which cohort that we're looking at. So when we look at the 2016 and 2017 cohort combined, that gives us a little bit more confidence in the results that we see. So this slide shows really the bottom line up front, the takeaways from our validity research. So when we look at the associations of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs, we're either alone or together in predicting medical students' performance on a wide range of outcomes. We are really trying to look at the extent to which MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs is the most important academic metrics in the application, the strength of the signals that these measures are providing in predicting students' likelihood of success in medical schools. And across the board, we find these 4 major bullet point findings. We see a strong relationship between MCAT scores and students' performance outcomes across the board, and that includes pre-clerkship performance, step 1 scores, and clerkship performance, as we will dive into deeper in a sec here. Across all the performance outcomes, we always see that some students perform better than their MCAT scores predict, and others perform less well. So there's individual variability in terms of how well their academic metrics predict their likelihood of success. And that speaks to what Kun was just talking about a few seconds ago, that there's a lot of other information you can gather about an applicant as it relates to their experiences and attributes in holistic review. And then we also find consistently that using MCAT total scores and undergraduate GPAs together provide better prediction of medical student performance than using either one alone. So this also speaks to the fact that different academic metrics provide different signals about medical school applicants' academic preparation prior to entering medical school. And then finally, when we look at important milestone outcomes in medical students' undergraduate medical career, when we think about those being passing step 1 exam on the first attempt and on-time progression, we see that students with a wide range of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs are able to succeed on those milestone outcomes. So that's another kind of important finding to keep in mind as you consider applicants and evaluate their academic metrics in terms of thinking about their future success in medical school. So let's dive right in. This first slide shows the relationship between MCAT scores and students' performance outcomes across 4 outcomes here we're looking at. The first one is pre-clerkship performance. So this is a measure that's similar to a GPA measure that's based on students' course grades from the first 2 years of medical school. And then we have step 1 scores. And then next we have 2 outcomes that we have just looked at this year for the 2016 cohort pertaining to clerkship performance. So this is the first time we are able to look at the relationship between MCAT scores and undergraduate GPA as it relates to clerkship. So we're looking at 2 outcome measures for clerkship. One is clerkship exam scores. So for most of the schools, those are the MBME clinical science subject exams. So we take an average of all the exams that they take during clerkships. And then we also calculate a clerkship GPA that is based on their overall clerkship ratings. So at the bottom, you will see that some of them have, anywhere ranging from 12 schools to 17 schools. So those are the MD granting schools in US and Canada that are participating in our validity study. So they provide outcomes that are local to their school for our research purpose for students that are volunteering to participate in the study. And then for other outcomes, as you see here, step 1, and later on we'll look at on-time progression. Those are based on our national sample of schools. So you'll see a larger N size, both in terms of schools and the number of students for those analyses. So for each of these outcomes, we calculate the correlation between MCAT total score and the performance outcome for each individual school. And then we look across all the schools, look across all the correlations from schools, and then we present the median correlations here, as you see represented by these maroon dots. And we also show the interquartile range, meaning the 25th percentile correlation to the 75% percentile correlation. So the gray bar here gives you a sense of not just the median correlation, but the range of variability across schools for each of these outcome variable. So, and then also for the blue line that you see here on the figure shows a correlation of 0.3. And down here, you see the legend that shows the effect sizes that we consider as small, medium, and large in social sciences. So the 0.3 correlation gives you a standard of medium effect, and then really anything that's of any correlations above 0.5 would be considered large. So across the board, we see that the median correlations between MCAT total scores and all the performance outcomes are 0.5 and above. And then even when we consider the interquartile range, we see a pretty strong range of correlations that are above the median, a medium effect line. So then when we zoom in, here's a scatter plot to show you what it looks like at one school. So this school has a, so this is a correlation showing the MCAT total score and clerkship exam score. And you see that the correlation between MCAT total score and clerkship exam at this particular school is 0.63. And this school also has a median MCAT total score of 511. So, and this line up here, the regression lines shows the it shows the strength of the relationship. So again, when it's trending upwards, that means the higher MCAT total score a student is admitted in, the higher clerkship exam score that the student likely to get. But these dots, which represent the actual students, you will see that they are really across the MCAT total score range. At every MCAT total score point, you see some dots below the regression line and some dots above the regression line. So that means there are always students performing better than expected, and then there are ones that are performing getting a lower score than they are than the model predicts them to get. But at a overall level, we see this upward trending pattern that shows higher MCAT scores correlating with higher clerkship exam scores. And it's the same thing we see with step 1 scores nationally. So this box and whisker plot shows that at each MCAT total score, we see the median step 1 score. So this jagged line connects all the median step 1 scores across the MCAT total score range. And then the blue box shows the 75th percentile to the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile step 1 score for a given MCAT total score. And then the whisker, the two black ends, shows the 10th percentile to the 90th percentile. So, and it happens just so coincidentally, the correlation between MCAT total score and step 1 score nationally is also 0.63. So again, we see this trending up pattern that shows a higher MCAT total scores correlating with higher step 1 scores. But then again, at each of the MCAT total score point, you see a pretty wide range of actual step 1 scores that students having each MCAT total score end up scoring on the step 1. And then next we're showing both using MCAT total score and undergraduate GPA alone and together, and how they predict the same medical student performance that we talked about, the 4 outcomes that we had just shared. So before we looked at the median correlations and the interquartile range for MCAT total scores correlating with the 4 performance outcomes. So the triangle markers here and the blue line, that's the same thing that we had just looked at a couple slides ago. But here we also add the correlations between undergraduate GPAs and those same 4 performance outcomes, and those are represented by these circles and connected through the gray line. And then on top of that, we also look at MCAT total scores and undergraduate GPAs together and how they predict the same 4 performance outcomes. So, and those are represented by these diamonds and then connected with the orange line. So again, you can see that at a glance, the orange line is always above either the blue line or the gray line, and the blue line by and large is above the gray line. So that means when MCAT scores are used alone, they predict better than when undergraduate GPAs are used alone. But really the takeaway lesson is that when the 2 of them are used together, they always predict better than either one of those alone. So that again speaks to these 2 academic metrics providing some unique information about the applicant's academic, pre-medical academic preparedness and their likelihood of success in medical school. So here is another way of showing how MCAT total scores and undergraduate GPA together predict one outcome. So step one scores here better than either one alone. So as you'll remember, a few slides ago, we looked at the box and whisker plots to show that there's a upward trend and a slightly jagged line to connect MCAT total scores and step one scores, showing a strong positive correlation between the two. So here we break out that line into three groups by undergraduate GPA range. So you see the black solid line being undergraduate GPA of 3.8 and above, and this dash dot line representing undergraduate GPAs between 3.4 and 3.79, and then the dotted line being undergraduate GPAs lower than 3.39. So again, you see that for all three lines, we see this upward trending pattern showing that higher MCAT total scores are correlated with higher step one scores. But also when you look at the three lines, we see that the higher GPA range would result in a higher line. So again, this shows the additional predictive validity that is added to the MCAT scores by you adding undergraduate GPA into the mix. So as I mentioned before, we also want to look at these milestone outcomes that are really important in medical students' undergraduate medical career. So the first one we look at is the step one pass rates on first attempt. So this grid, I think you're probably pretty familiar with the format, as you saw some of that in earlier in the presentation. So we have the MCAT total scores in the columns, and then we have the GPA totals in the rows. And then for each of the cells that are in this grid, we show the number of people within that MCAT total score range and the undergraduate GPA range. And then out of those people, how many of them passed step one on the first attempt. So you see the pass rate for that particular cell being calculated that way. And then at the bottom of the bottom row shows all the total pass rates for each of the MCAT total range. And then this column to the right shows all the pass rates for all the GPA range that we show here. And then this bottom right-hand corner shows that overall, 97% of students pass step one on the first attempt. So we know that, across the board, students with a wide range of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPAs are able to pass step one on first attempt. But we also want to show this pattern of the data by using the color coding. So you see the cells that are shaded in blue show pass rates of 90 and above, and the ones shaded in green show pass rates between 80 and 89, and then the orange shading cells represent pass rates of 70 to 79. So again, even though across the board we see by and large students pass step one on first attempt, and that's true across a wide range of MCAT total scores and undergraduate GPA total, we do see a pattern of higher pass rates as the MCAT total score increases and the undergraduate GPA increases. So you see a lot more blue towards this corner of the grid, and even going from 91, 92, 92 all the way to 99, and then you see that then it gradually decreases to the upper 80s and then the lower 80s shaded in green, and then you have an orange cell here. So this shows that while across the board, a wide range of them pass, we do see an increase of pass rates as the MCAT total scores and the GPA total go up. And then when we look at on-time progression, we see a very similar pattern in represented in this grid. So again, similar format as the previous slide. You see that the progression rates really get up to 98% towards the highest MCAT total and GPA total. But then when you get to the more mid-range MCAT total scores and GPA total scores, you're still seeing, 89%, 87%, 85%. So it's still a wide range of the majority of the students progress on time. So information like this really provides schools with more data points in considering in their admissions what their school's goals are, and when they admit students to make up a class, how they can evaluate some of this information to determine what levels of support that they can provide to students in order to help students achieve these milestones better. So last but not least, we also conduct analyses on differential prediction, looking at how this kind of predictive validity of MCAT scores and undergraduate GPA together against the different outcomes, how that might vary for different socio-demographic groups. And I'm not going to have time to go into details for this, but this is, you can find a lot more technical details about this line of research and the collection of academic medicine publications that Quinn shared on an earlier slide. But by and large, we see very comparable prediction for students from different groups by socioeconomic, or by both demographic and socioeconomic backgrounds.
Hey Jesse, this is Quinn. I think somehow we lose the stuff on the screen. I'm gonna grab the screen and share it from my end if you are experiencing technical difficulty.
Oh no, you don't see my screen?
At least I cannot see, and I see another attendee says he cannot see anything on the screen.
Oh, sorry about that, because mine is showing still sharing. So let me try to, are you sharing, or do you want me to try to share again?
You can try again. If you still cannot share, I can try that on my end.
Okay, are you still, let me know if you're seeing
Yep,
it.
it's coming up now.
Okay, so it might have just died. So I know we only have about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna go through the remaining few slides on our 2020 testing plan updates. This slide, I won't go into the details. The information is on our website, but this shows the various components of the revised testing plan that we have put up this year. And really across the different features and measures that we have put in place, the goal is for us to increase flexibility and really providing maximum opportunities for students to allow them to test when they want to, and making sure that students who want to test will have the opportunity to do so. So you'll probably already know a lot of these that we've been testing 3 times a day. We've added additional test days, we've expedited scoring for the rest of the year, and we've waived fees for students so they can reschedule and cancel at any time they want. So I just want to quickly walk through this, this slide on the current snapshot of where we stand with this year's testing plan, as I'm sure many of you are curious about that. So as you know that 8 test days were canceled between March and through the end of May. So before March, we had administer about 13,000 exams across four test days in January through March. And then since we resumed testing for some states at the end of May and then towards the beginning of June nationwide, we have since then administered more than 25,000 exams across the 7 test states. And then we also still have over 65,000 tests scheduled across 14 test days for the remainder of the year. So when you add all those exams that have taken place and the ones scheduled to take place, we're looking at over 100,000 exams for this year. And then on top of that, we still have over 50,000 seats available in August and September for people that still need to test or want to test. So those are some quick statistics to give you a quick sense of where we are in terms of our testing plan and also in terms of our upcoming capacity. And last but not least, we have received some questions with regard to the equity of our testing plan, whether students in certain demographic groups may be further disadvantaged this year, given the situation. So we've been conducting some analyses and we're closely monitoring the data trends. So far, what we have observed is that the race ethnicity compositions of students that are that either have taken the test this year or are scheduled to test is very similar to the racial ethnic composition of last year's examinees. So across the board, we see that there are more people either testing or scheduled to test this year than last year in every single race ethnicity group, and they're doing so in similar percentages this year. So again, these data don't really speak to any individual circumstances, but we're also closely tracking the statistics at a large scale. So that leaves us 1 minute, but I know we have been trying to answer questions during the presentations, and I know there's a plan if there are any questions that remain unanswered. We'll coordinate with Jamie to make sure that we can get those answered for you guys. So with that, thank you so much for spending the time with us today, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
And this is Jamie again. I just want to thank the team from the AAMC for spending their hour with us and all the prep work that went into creating this for us. I know there weren't many questions online, and I know that many of you are probably just thinking through some of the information presented. So if you do have questions later, you know that you can always reach out to me and I will get those answers for you from MCAT staff. So I just wanted to be sure and be mindful of MCAT staff's time and your time as well. So with that, we are about 2 minutes overdue. I know there is one question. I'm not sure you guys have time to answer that. If you do, we can stick around. If not, please let us know. Looks like it's in the chat, the question.
Right, this is Kun Yuan. We are looking into score differences by potentially any of the testing sessions. We're looking into that. And when we have the results, we can share that. And then another note I want to say is that for the longitudinal research that evaluate the current MCAT exam, representatives from DO schools and ACOM has been partnering with us along the way. They were involved in the initial planning of this research and has been attending our annual MCAT Validity Committee and to get update from the research and provide input to guide our next steps. So stay tuned for our future updates.
Well, I'm going to end it at that. And again, this presentation will be available via recording in the next couple of days, and we'll email that out to you when it's available. Again, thank you for your time, for listening and learning, and thank you for AAMC for you guys presenting to us. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of the afternoon or morning, depending on what time zone you're at. Thank you.